All right, everybody, welcome to the 9th episode of the Pixel Vision Podcast. I'm Rez. I'm once again joined by
Deft Beck.
And we have not one, not two, but really three guests with us today. First off, Melora.
Hi, everybody.
Returning to the podcast after a successful episode.
Yes. Shadow.
Our new guest.
Hello, everyone.
Shadow is my friend from hometown.
And from 4chan, Anonymous.
Hello.
It's about as classy as an intro you're going to get.
Yeah.
Hide your script kitties, everybody.
So
Hide your PSN network server files.
Today's topic is Touhou Project.
Yep. What is that? Well, we're going to tell you.
Touhou Project, in short, is probably one of the most famous series of Japanese doujin games or indie games ever created in the modern era.
Yeah, I'd say it's the most popular, at least in Japan, it's now considered the most popular game, despite it actually being an independent game, which is pretty interesting.
And who created the games originally?
It's, Zune is his moniker. He's essentially this one Japanese guy who learned how to make music, learned how to make games, and put the two together and did a whole game by himself, and it just kind of took off.
He used to be a Taito employee, correct?
My hero.
Oh.
Yeah,
That's pretty sick.
Definitely an inspiring story, but we'll kind of get into that.
Yeah.
So he started out not on Windows platform, but he started out on the PC98 computer, which was that who made that computer?
Well, it was NEC.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's like a major corporation.
Before Windows was a major thing in Japan, or at least popularly used, they used PC98 computers in a lot of enterprise.
So was PC98 like 1998?
Not necessarily.
No.
Or was it 98?
Because it used to be PC88,
Yes.
then it evolved into 98.
Yes.
So something to do with architecture or something, I guess.
They were like the desktop computers. They had pretty simplistic graphics for the time.
Yeah.
They were still decent enough that before the upgrade to Windows, it was more or less the de facto standard for Japanese business. So people had them in their, would you say 88 was like the business machines and 98 was more like the home machines?
See, the PC88, when it came out, was essentially just a business model machine, but it kind of evolved into being its own game machine because people, more wealthy Japanese people would be able to buy them and, put other software on it besides business software. So that's kind of where all the doujin stuff emerged from. It being...
Doujin meaning fan works.
Yes.
Or works made by not professional companies.
Yeah, so I would say it kind of blew up because the programming languages that were used were, available to the entire public. So there's kind of this, in the mid to late 80s, there was this big boom to where all these independent people were learning how to program games, which is where Zune started off on.
Right. And what's interesting about what you said is that you mentioned there were a lot of wealthy Japanese people who owned these computers to do business.
Yeah.
It sort of reminds me of the early days of the Sierra adventure games where, what was that name of the woman who made some of the first adventure games?
Roberta Williams.
Yes. It was her and her husband.
Yeah, like her and Cliff Blazinski is another.
Cliff was
old DOS.
Kind of
DOS
was
guy.
a hero of mine for a while.
So essentially,
made some dumb decisions lately.
but they were operating because home computers at the time were still a big investment. So only people who were kind of in either making the games or people who could afford the games could really get into that. At least at first. But then when personal computers became more ubiquitous and these tools became more widely available, that's how
It's
independent
almost
development.
300,000 yen.
Wow. How much would that have been at the time in the late 80s?
Oh, with the inflation, let's say, what is it, $800,000? Or no, 300,000. So that's...
We're just looking it up.
That's basically I would say maybe $2,500 US dollars.
Then again, they were going through the bubble economy.
With the inflation and everything.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Was the bubble economy was through the early 90s, right?
That's not really unusual because early 90s Windows PCs too were honestly within that range. They were quite a few grand.
Yeah.
Even for just something that had a 32 megabyte hard drive. I'm not even kidding.
Yeah, but there was a lot of different before everything standardized to Windows and Mac, there were a lot of different standards in terms of just putting a game onto these different platforms took a lot of different sorts of work, and so you really specialize in a certain type of machine.
Right.
And so that environment is where the first 5 Touhou games were created, correct?
Yes.
And what were the titles of those? Do you remember?
Well, the first couple were actually not Danmaku, they were...
Danmaku is a term within the Touhou series meaning the type of...
yeah.
We didn't even explain what this type of
Sorry,
games Touhou are.
I use a lot of
Yeah,
Jumped
they're made
ahead
on
a
this
little bit.
computer. Here they are. We didn't tell you what they are at all, but don't worry, they're good.
So essentially, for the uninitiated, the Touhou Project games are a series of shoot-'em-up games in which you control, for the most part, these sort of young female characters who are either so the two primary characters that you play as in most of the games are Reimu Hakure, who is a shrine maiden of, what's her shrine?
Hakure.
Yes, so effectively what she does is... So the games take place within this mythical sort of otherworldly area called Gensokyo, which is more or less a place out of space and time, but it's more or less feudal Japan, right?
It's a weird mix between feudal Japan and it extends to a lot of occultism, and it also goes into like hell and heaven and a lot of Shinto versus Buddhist practices. So for a non-Japanese person, some of the lore can be lost on a Westerner.
Yeah, some of the meaning can be a little lost.
If you're honestly probably more like an actual anime or even like otaku or something, this stuff will actually probably be pretty similar to you. If you witness anything with mentions of yokai, Shinto mythology, anything along those lines within Japanese myth and belief.
Yeah, a lot of it's like certain things that are taken as a granted within Western media that you sort of like pick up on if you're not necessarily like native to that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Japanese people definitely, when they saw how big this market became, they all kind of rushed to be content creators, kind of like how people are now with music. Like, they all just sort of all flocked to making games because the way the Japanese laws were it was very easy to sell a product that was your own game without, a huge corporation endorsing it. And that's kind of where everyone began as independent game makers.
And that was generally not even really possible for the most part of the States, really.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Because Japan is such a tightly concentrated country in a lot of places. Unless you're in like Hokkaido or something. For the most part, if you're in Tokyo, Kyoto, whatever, it's pretty tightly
and
population.
So that's another reason why they had access to a lot of PCs, because usually a lot of people had a business or some kind of, information business. Right. So they'd have access to those kind of things.
So, back to the original point, the Touhou series of games are a series of shoot-'em-up games in which you play as the Shrine Maiden Reimu Hakure or her witch friend Marisa, right?
Yes.
As you go through various situations that are native to each of the games. So there were the first 5 games, which were the PC98 games, but because you had mentioned earlier during our outlining that the games were more or less made through a different company, and therefore they're not necessarily canon to the modern games anymore.
Zun, before forming Shanghai Alice, which is
basically the Dojin
his
group.
current company, he kind of had this partnership going with, I don't believe I remember his name, but he had a small team when he first started making games, and all of the characters became property of, a couple people. So, after they stopped making games on the PC98 in 2001 or something, for the Windows games, he kind of made another company, Shanghai Alice, and he kind of started making more bigger productions. So the games started being massive, and the visuals were incredibly updated. Even for the time now, specifically the art backgrounds are very, very well detailed.
Yeah, we were watching Anon play through Touhou 7, which is one of the Windows titles. And
yes, the second Windows game, so I think 2002 or 3.
That's Perfect Cherry Blossom.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And that game, more or less, that's one of a couple that I can name off the top of my head, but that's one of the prototypical kind of early Windows games that a lot of people know.
That's the one that I remember from playing in high school and computer club and stuff, along with Warcraft 3 and Quake and things like that.
Yeah, it got spread around.
So one term that Anon mentioned earlier was Danmaku. So this sort of requires you to explain another term. Within the shoot-'em-up genre, there's a subgenre called bullet hell, in which the main draw of the game is you have a tiny little target that you control. You have to navigate around these mazes of bullets that you have to go and dodge or else you die. And Danmaku basically means... What does that mean in Japanese?
I honestly don't know.
You can search it quick, but it amounts to basically every character within this series has the ability to make these use this sort of Danmaku magic in order to make the magic they use to go and fight each other.
Yeah, so the actual games...
it means bullet curtain. We just did the research there.
I see.
Yep, I mean, Danmaku, bullet curtain or curtain fire, also known as bullet hell in English, is a Japanese term for barrage, as in a barrage of bullets. They are shoot-em-ups similar to regular shooting games that focus more on weaving through complex patterns containing anywhere from dozens to hundreds of bullets, and the genre is considered the hardest genre for a shoot-em-up. So think of like Life Force or Gradius or R-Type or steroids.
Modern example would be Ikaruga, would be a bullet hell.
Yeah, bullet hells are often usually more or less basically vertical.
Yes.
Are there any horizontal bullet hells?
There's a few.
Yeah. Isn't Dead Smiles horizontal?
Yes.
That's one example.
Yeah,
that's
one of the cave ones.
Yeah, it's only released in arcades and on Xbox 360 of all things. Somehow. That's an expensive game, by the way, now.
Yeah,
they used to have a 360 console with a shell.
Mike has it.
Oh,
that's a collector's item, yeah. That's the Shoes, an aborted character in the...
We called him Shoes in the first-person shooter. I'm not going to say his last name, so...
Everyone goes by a pseudonym in the Resverse.
In the online world.
Yes. So
we're all traps here. Can't take off the helmets.
So, these Touhou games... How many were there, so there were... For a long time...
let me start. A long time, there was only the 5 PC98 games.
Yeah.
Yes, and then in the kind of mid-2000s, there were the Windows games.
Yeah, and then they started coming out way more frequently, one or two a year.
And then they were being sold at Comic-Con, which, for the uninitiated, is basically like a Comic-Con in Japan, but it's not just for comics or manga. It's for games, it's for music, it's for all sorts of fan stuff.
Yeah,
and Zone would go there to sell the games, like physical copies of the games to people there. Yeah, and that's where it became very popular.
Sorry, the whole Comic-Con boom, where it's similar to the whole PC market boom, where everyone had these computers and they wanted to make things. The whole Comic-Con community was basically everyone they all realized that they didn't need like a big label to sell their own creative works.
You don't need to go through Sony to go and make a big game.
Yeah, exactly. You could just do whatever you want, and all the profits went straight to you.
Yes.
So all these Japanese people realized, if I like something, whether it's some 80s or 90s anime like back then, they would just make a fan work of it, and they wouldn't have to pay anyone else. And it would just all go to that.
Yeah, it's skirting on, especially when you're making a derivative project, like a fan project. It's a little bit illegal, but at the same time, I do know the laws are different in Japan in terms of fan content.
Yeah, copyright is very different.
It's very much more strict, right? I know when they parody something in an anime, they have to censor the names of the anime because otherwise it's considered infringement.
TV has its own censorship, like liabilities, but fan-made works are kind of they're not within the law, but they're not they're not policed very often.
It's probably about as much of a gray area as review YouTubers using copyright footage and stuff. Basically, it's there. Something might happen, but 9 times out of 10, nobody's really going to go after them in a civil suit or anything like that.
Exactly.
They'll just get demonetized because YouTube.
Millar, correct me if I'm wrong, but I remember there being a thing with fan art and selling at anime conventions wherein you couldn't use trademark symbols on your fan art.
I think that was a thing, yeah.
Yeah, so I know that there was a thing at one of the major anime conventions in California. There would be some people from Funimation who would go around and saying, you can't sell this because it uses his copyrighted symbol.
Yeah, it was they specifically...
You can't use this trademark, basically.
They went around and they looked for pieces that specifically had these certain symbols on them or likenesses. And
it was a big deal a couple years ago.
That was Funimation? Why am I not surprised?
One of the licensors basically told representatives to go around to say, you can't sell this if it uses this specific symbol or something. Mm. That's why a lot of the fan art will kind of obfuscate it. You can tell it's for that particular character, but more or less they kind of make it harder for them to enforce that law.
We talk more stuff about anime eventually. I want to. Funimation's a good example, so it really fell from grace too.
Yeah,
they've gotten way stricter.
So, back on the main topic, Touhou became a very dominant force within the doujin scene. I think. There are counts of there's 700 or so tables at Comic-Con.
Yeah, so now
during the winter and summer Comic-Con. And how much of it is Touhou?
I would say now it's actually declining because there's a new game that came out that everyone kind of flocked to as the new like Dojin fan game, which is Kantai Collection.
Although that's made by a major company, though.
Yeah, so they're kind of...
There's like Konkole, yes.
Konkole.
For the uninitiated, Konkole is...
Oh, the Battleship Girls?
Yeah.
Yes.
Shadow kind of spoiled it. It's anime battleships.
Yeah.
All real-life ships that are... There's a mobile game and a browser game you can play, but effectively, you draw cute anime girls who are also giant battleships.
Well, let's take into consideration here, we have a tendency to call battleships she.
Yes, that's true.
So I think it's just the fact Japan just wants to turn every single thing into a just small, cute girl.
Yeah.
Mascots.
We're going to have Nuke-chan soon.
The mascots. We need mascots, you know.
Essentially,
it just stuck though. Like it kind of like Touhou, the same way Touhou stuck to everyone is like, oh, it's the new thing that everyone's talking about, and then that dominated for 10 plus years.
Even with that, though, I think what's interesting, though, is unlike a lot of things like that, Touhou's staying power is really strong. And not only is its staying power strong, but even though it started out as bullet hell, it broke out into, like, multiple genres. Like, first being the fact that the bullet hells first started being, like, versus, like, modes and stuff. We can compete against it. To the point where a full-on fighting game. Basically, well, no, first, actually, I'm looking here at the PC98 games. It's, like, the fifth one, actually. It did have a versus mode.
Yeah.
It was Phantasmagoria of Dim Dream.
The menagerie, yeah.
Yes. Oh, that's okay. That's abbreviation there. Yeah, and then going further down,
there were a couple of like 2D
Scarlet Weather Rhapsody is like actual full-on fighting game.
Yeah, Scarlet Weather Rhapsody
like life bars and everything.
It was the first major fighting game that actually is one of the. I think it was the first game that Zune didn't make himself. After the split with the PC98 company,
right?
So he actually got a hold of this Dojin company, which I think it was the same one that made a lot of Aerogay fighters, which is like a whole nother like niche community.
Yes,
yeah.
And he knew about those fighting games that they made, and they're like, oh, this fits perfectly with Touhou, so it just naturally came about.
Yeah, so they're basically like half games. They're between the major releases. There's also the couple of games in which you play as the photographer girl, correct?
Oh yeah, There's a couple spin-off
games,
games,
right?
That people don't consider the main series. Series is mostly like the big major releases that are all the same gameplay style.
Yes,
because he always just stuck with the same type of gameplay.
Yeah, but with the Anon games, it's like she doesn't have any weapon besides her camera, so the whole point of the game is you have to go and capture when they're using particular types of attacks or spell cards.
Yeah.
Basically, major attacks within the Touhou games are called spell cards, and they use these. And there's like big animations in which they slide in and stuff, and they start using the special attack in which the bullets come out in like particular patterns.
I remember one particular girl uses forbidding cards, and I tell you, that's annoying.
Yeah, I bet.
Why is it actually?
I think you're thinking of all the end stage bosses. You can't use a bomb on them.
Oh, is that what the forbidding cards?
Forbidden cards.
They lock that out basically.
Yeah, so your bomb, you can use a bomb still, but it doesn't damage the enemy.
So when you're encountering these Danmaku waves, you can use a bomb in order to go and clear the waves like instantaneously.
Right.
Maybe it's kind of a panic button, basically.
Yes.
When you're like,
when you get good at the games, it becomes a reaction button more so than I want to use a bomb button.
Because there's also a mechanic in which you can use a bomb as a life if you're about to die, right?
Yeah, so you can do what's referred to as death bombing, which I believe is within getting hit by getting hit by a bullet, you have 1/10 of a second to activate the bomb after the death sound starts, and that actually erases your death and makes you use a bomb instead. So a lot of advanced players will use death bombing as a kind of as an insurance to not waste a life, because you're like you see the bullet about to hit you and you decide, am I going to commit to the bomb or not? But if you can shrink your reaction time down to where it's a fast reaction, you can pretty much get a death bomb every time. And that's where you see a lot of the harder difficulty players using liberally.
Yes, and these games in particular, they're moderately accessible for bullet hell games, right?
You mean accessible wasn't difficulty, or
in terms of like when you were playing Touhou 7, there were like 4 difficulties, right?
Yes.
And those would be the novice one all the way up to the hardest one,
right?
Lunatic, right?
Yeah.
And what are the main differences between those two? Between those 4?
Easy mode is considered like the very beginning, but it doesn't reward the player because there's nothing to unlock after beating easy mode. However, there are extra stages in a lot of the games to unlock, but you need to beat the entire game without using a continue on normal, at least. So the whole meme of like easy mode became a thing because there are all
easy
these,
mode.
like,
don't only kids play on easy mode?
There are all these non-Maku players that were very new to shoot 'em ups, and they were like, I just want to play for the characters.
Right.
And they wouldn't get very far because
they're
not very good. So there's a major split in, like, even in the Comic community, there was like a hardcore audience that would just play the games. They wouldn't read any of the fan works or anything. They'd make like fan games that they consider canon, and there's like canon wars and all this crazy stuff.
And then they call the people who only like listen to the music and all the fan stuff secondaries, right?
At least with like the early days of 4chan, they used to call them like secondaries.
Yes, they still call them that on A.
Oh,
like people who only watch the anime, they call secondaries.
Wow.
Yeah.
Who only watch the anime? What specifically?
Of any franchise.
So like if it originated with a manga, they'd be like, if you don't read the manga, you're secondary for just watching it.
Oh,
yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah, okay.
I hunt for light novels of that stuff.
Yeah.
That's the
I guess source
primary
material.
of the secondary.
Yeah.
I guess it's like source material. I mean, because when you think about that, like something could be a light novel, be a manga first. It all depends in that regard.
Although arguably it's how accessible that material is. Because sometimes an anime will come out for something, but the manga isn't translated.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And as I was explaining before, with like genres branching out too, and we're talking about like manga, anime, even stranger enough with Touhou too, is it branched out even further?
Yeah, there are tons of interesting fan works out there.
All kinds of different things. One that's actually kind of a bit of a meme and a phenomenon was actually the song Bad Apple, which was originally from the
Astromeria.
Soundtrack for Stage 3 of Lotus Land Story, which was from the PC98 games. But the interesting thing about this song, despite the fact that it's already just good anyway, caught on was in the 2010s, a music video was actually created that was basically using black and white video sequences of the girls, just moving to the beat of the music and everything. And
there's a whole story behind it.
Recreated for multiple game systems, and I find actually fascinating with that for competitions with demo scenes and stuff. I got EverDrive for my NES recently. Lets me play any NES game on my real NES. I could play Bad Apple on my NES. Yeah.
The story
it actually sounds really cool for an 8-bit system too.
There's a story behind the creation of Bad Apple.
Yep.
Is it a very sad one?
Well, there's the story behind the lyrics of the song, which are just basically about being in need, right?
I wouldn't say that. It's.
Honestly,
a lot of Astromeria lyrics, like the artist that made the song that went viral, he's kind of like a club guy where like he's like loose and like everything's cool, and like it's kind of like similar to America's club scene where like a lot of the lyrics were.
Rez is doing some research, so he's like looking up some stuff. Yeah, Masayoshi Minamori is the guy who made the remix of Bad Apple that's fairly famous.
Yeah, that's really where it took off, because the PC98 game, the music from that, like that album, no one really cared about it until everyone started making remixes and fan albums of like all the music. So
that first it was PC98, then the remix was made, and then what ended up happening was people in Niku Niku Dogo was like, this song needs a music video. So people were actually thinking of, okay, what would the visuals be? And someone came up with a storyboard with like very basic visuals for it. And then someone actually went ahead and made the 3D animation for it, which is probably one of the most famous Touhou works. Like,
ever.
Yeah, essentially. Everyone is. Yeah, if you're a weeb, you've seen Bad Apple.
Yeah, if you don't know what Touhou is, you've definitely seen this at some point on the internet.
Because effectively, even if you don't, like, it tells the story just on the visuals alone. Even if you don't know what the lyrics are saying, it's more or less sort of showcasing pretty much all the famous Touhou characters of the time, right?
Yeah.
And more or less the visuals are kind of morphing into each other. It's very minimalist black and white style. If you've never seen Bad Apple, I recommend, even if you don't know anything about Touhou, just watch that. You'll kind of get a sense of This is more or less encapsulates what people think of as the Touhou kind of fan community.
Yeah, and the fact we're talking about that video actually makes sense to, like, Melora was telling us earlier of how she actually, however, first heard of Touhou was through videos on the internet.
Right?
Yeah, mostly through a lot of videos and the MADs or YTPMVs or whatever you would call them.
MADs were like, they would sync a song to, like, and they would kind of edit, like, another source to make it seem like they're singing the song.
All the Owen memes and...
Sounds similar to AMVs.
Yeah, very similar. Yeah.
But though they had actual 3D models that they use for the animations.
Yeah,
and it would be
that's MMD.
It would always be, oh, what's the song from? And it's from Touhou Project. And Touhou is always just kind of this monolith that was always kind of there.
Yes, definitely.
And you would always just kind of know it was there, and you could kind of tell what a Touhou song sounded like. You could tell. Like, you could see these characters are everywhere. You never knew what they were, but you just knew they were there. They're just from this large and nebulous thing called Touhou Project. And it's just vast.
Over time, you just sort of pick up on things.
Yeah.
Like, I knew, like, the Blue Ice Fairy, Cyrano, or Chirno, depending on your pronunciation. Is it Chirno?
The official way to say it is Chirno. But
yeah.
Chirno,
So,
I would say Cyrano.
Like, she's the idiot Ice Fairy who's really easy to defeat. And then you have, Marisa and Reimu, and then you have, like, the key bosses, you have the sub-bosses. Yeah. Like, they all have their... You have Han Meiling, who is the Chinese girl.
Go to take a perfect math class with her.
Yes.
The perfect math class.
Yeah, the amount of world building in those games.
Marisa stole the precious thing.
Yes. Or Help Me, Aaron.
Yes.
The song is very famous.
The amount of world building within the games is pretty impressive, especially for an independent person. Because there was never really any kind of format or, like, aside from, like, early Nintendo games and stuff, or like Zelda, where, like, you have this world within all the games together. There was not really anything made by an independent person until then, and then it just kind of started with, these few Windows games, and then it evolved, and eventually made a manga of just the lore from the games that became canon, and
Zun wrote that manga, right?
Yes. And it all just kind of, like, exploded. And it's definitely why, the biggest reason why it got so popular is every year, something new would come out. And there'd just be more and more to add on it each time.
And you first played Touhou 7 Perfect Cherry Blossom in high school, correct?
Oh, yes. It was a long time ago. I mean,
I think we all both did.
I remember playing that one, too.
And was it the first one that was translated? Is that why?
I don't know.
Is that the whole reason?
I think it was
or was it just that popular?
It was, I think, Embodiment of Scarlet Devil, the first Windows game, it was the most... It was the reason it blew up in the first place.
Really?
Because, you had Flandre and all
the Scarlet Sisters.
All the big, awesome. Memes and stuff. But then the one that came out, like, a year later was Perfect Cherry Blossom, which, actually changed a lot from the 6th game, where a lot of things that were janky and unpolished had now become, like, really polished. Like,
really?
Especially the art. Like, the art in the backgrounds that are scrolling. It's significantly improved, which is crazy for a 1 year difference.
Certainly. And, Shadow was saying that he discovered a lot of Touhou on just watching random YouTube weeb videos, right?
It actually showed up on a suggested video, because I was listening to music videos of other stuff.
Probably looking up Hellsing music or whatever, right?
Yeah, virtually yes. But, hey. But the fact that it's because I just found a picture. It had to do with the song UN Owner. Is that what it's called?
UN Owen was her, yes.
Yeah, UN Owen was her.
Which is odd because I think all of the songs are in Japanese, but this one extra stage boss, Flandre, he wrote UN Owen was her, which doesn't really make sense. It just, like, who is UN Owen, which was never actually, like, talked about. It's just this mystery.
I think Flander is, seen all the memes and all the pictures of her, she's known for many random reasons. That's just like...
But she's very sadistic, right?
It's more the fact that she has no one to play. I feel like it does to do with she had no one to play with, I think. Right. She was mostly locked in a cellar.
She was the vampire girl, right?
One of them, yeah. There's two sisters.
There's two. Marmalia's the other one.
Which one's the more dangerous one?
I would say Flandre.
Yeah, Flandre.
She's the more unhinged one.
And I believe she liked, what was it? What was the name of the gatekeeper?
Oh, Sakuya.
Yes.
The maid. Yeah. Who can stop time.
Yes.
Yep.
And speaking in terms of that too, since we were talking about seeing the songs on YouTube, the songs themselves kind of seem to have a whole new life of themselves as well, because now we're also seeing them featured in a lot of Japanese rhythm games.
Definitely.
As well.
It's I've compared it to, this is the classical music canon of Weep.
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
I would agree with that.
I mean, it wasn't until recent though. Like rhythm games have existed since like the early mid 90s.
Yeah, it is a recent.
It was something like 2013 or 14 or whatever where
Osu.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it was a combination of
actual arcade.
I think it was Bimani and Sega-based rhythm games specifically. With Bimani,
Bimani, for the uninitiated, is the Konami series of music games of which DDR and Beatmania are iterations of.
You'll learn more about that from us eventually soon. But some of the more common games that was on was definitely Beatmania 2DX, Sound Voltex. I believe Papa Music has it too, doesn't it?
It does now, yeah.
Well, Sound Voltex was notable because that game is mainly centered around remixing music.
Yes, that's very true.
And it contains a lot of Touhou music, suffice to say.
But we also know Project Diva has it as well.
Yes. I don't know if there's Touhou stuff in Diva.
Oh, no, definitely not.
Or not Project Diva. What was the other one I was trying to think of? Or not Diva. Why did I say Diva? I apologize. Jacob.
Musica? Musica has some.
Musica, yeah, that's Bomani. I was trying to think of the... I know there's Sega ones that do. Like, Waka does, right?
Yeah.
It was like Beat Stream or something.
Could be.
They're looking at the touchpad game.
Beat Stream does have Cherno's perfect math class and stuff.
It's perfect.
Cherno's perfect
I
math.
love
Wait,
that.
is that a song too?
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Yeah,
Oh, I
music
thought
video.
it was a game.
No, it's a music video. Oh, it's beautiful.
I refuse to believe anything with the word math and class in it.
That is the name. That is the name of the song. But it's basically like, here's this idiot girl teaching a math class about very silly things that happen in Gensokyo.
Oh, dear.
It's one of those songs where you would just know it if you heard it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Just the first 5 seconds of it.
Yeah.
You hear it, it's either you want to turn it off or you want to blast it. Depends on your circle of people. So, we're all familiar with it through... Oh, Anon, you first learned of it when you were browsing 4chan's A board in the mid-2000s, right?
Yeah, back then,
Touhou was just...
kind of...
It wasn't relegated to
introduced me
JP,
everything
right?
Japanese, yeah.
Yeah.
Before then, we had Adult Swim and television to introduce us to, anime. So, I kind of naturally gravitated towards there, because it's like, oh, what are they discussing? What's cool in Japan now? And then Touhou was this big thing, and everyone's like, oh, there was, no translations for anything back then, so you were like, wow, I'm so cool, what does this all mean? So they all rushed to translate it. And that's kind of how the English Touhou community came about, is they were just, in awe of everything just happening. They're like, wow, these games are really good, but we don't know a lot about them. And then, they started translating them, and it's where it really...
That's how the characters
took off.
became
Yes.
more loved.
Plus, a big part of Touhou, as far as I understand, is a lot of it is up to interpretation, too. People can interpret a character in many different ways in their own frameworks.
I feel like that our lovely Shrine Maiden, I feel that she drinks a heck of a lot because she has to deal with all the crap.
Poor Reimu.
I think Marisa likes to drink more.
Oh.
That's like a manga thing.
Now we're getting into canon debate here.
So,
who's the bigger alcohol?
That is the long and storied history of Touhou's past. Now, what about the present? See, for the most part, these games, at least in the West, are pirated. That's the obvious truth about these games. Most of the time, people download a big pack of them, and then they have the translation patches already in there. You can play. Even you don't have to play the story if you don't want. Touhou 17 for a little while until it was translated. You just play that's the latest one. You just play in Japanese.
Specifically, the community translated it literally within minutes of it being released. But,
wow!
But that's not what we had back then. We had to wait 6 months at least for a patch in English. So people that knew Japanese were, they go on 4chan and be like, spoil everything for everyone else. They're just be an asshole. Be
right. But for
what you missing?
But these were games that were not available digitally at all, because keep in mind that until fairly recently, the Japanese don't like to buy they don't like to buy games digitally for the most part until pretty recently, most recent console generation, to give a
there was always very strict anti-piracy laws, which prevented them from obtaining a lot of stuff.
Even when the games got a translation patch in like in the mid 2000s, early 2010s, at least for visual novels, what they would do is, okay, if you want this translation patch, you have to break your original disc in half and send a picture of it to me.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's pretty funny.
It's very like you have to commit.
You just burn it onto a blank disc and just like put a sticker on it.
Yeah.
Like back in the old days when you pirate PS1 games and you put a fake label on it and then, have a mod chip on your PS1 and you just buy anything you want.
But for the most part, you can only get the games like a physical disc that you order from Japan from like Zone's company.
Yeah.
Or you go to Comic. Although, from what I understand, people at Comic-Con know that Westerners go there to buy the games.
They do now, yeah.
There was a big stigma. There was a bit of xenophobia involved, basically, where like they knew Westerners would go there to buy the games, then upload them, so they wouldn't sell to Westerners.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, jeez. Didn't also when they sold these games too, like on disc and everything, they actually still had cases and everything.
Oh yeah.
Art and
they're still all released physically.
So it's easier, because this is not officially behind a corporation or anything. Is it easier for them to manufacture them still? Were the PC98 games released physically?
Yeah, they were. Yeah. And they were in giant fucking boxes.
I was gonna say how they make that actually happen back then. Was it easier in Japan to do that, I suppose?
I think how little it sold back then.
It was very
probably
wasn't.
He probably wasn't printing thousands of them because their games are incredibly hard to find now.
Oh, okay.
I think on eBay they're $1,000 or something.
Oh, the PC98 ones.
Yeah,
I imagine the Windows ones aren't that expensive.
Oh no. Because the release in the Windows era was so much larger in scale.
Because there was a following now, so they had some money.
Yeah, exactly.
But for the most part, Touhou had this sort of allure to, it's this Japanese thing that you can only play in Japanese. But now it's a lot more accessible to get. Yeah, actually, you can buy the latest couple Touhou games on Steam, but the caveat is that they're still in Japanese. There's no official English release of any mainline Touhou game made by Zone, because even if Touhou is this massive international sort of these kind of niche phenomenon, it's still made by one guy for the most part, and
he's incredibly indifferent to all of his fans, which is actually a blessing because it allows fan makers
to thrive.
Creative content makers to just do whatever they want with it.
He's he carries a philosophy of being as long as you're not trying to defraud me of money, or you're not trying to majorly infringe on my copyright, you can make fan stuff and sell it at cons and stuff. I don't care. And that's that sort of laissez-faire, you can do what you want attitude is really cause the fandom to really blossom.
Yeah, and that's what made Comic at Dojin artists to really stick with that, because they knew there was little risk and everyone was doing it.
Right. I mean, even the you've heard of Clamp, right?
Yes.
Clamp, the creators of
for the manga artists, right?
Yeah. So they were actually JoJo Yaoi artists.
Oh my god!
In college, did you know
that? Okay.
Whoa,
what?
Okay.
That definitely explains.
Wow, we're going way in a different direction here.
But it's literally a bunch of women in college who are all going to art school who were let's draw some JoJo Yaoi with Stardust Crusaders era stuff with the JoJo at the time in his stand, doing it. That's what they were doing before they went on to make their beautiful Chinese mythology stuff and Cardcaptor Sakura and stuff. So there's beginnings to everything,
Is that why their legs are so big?
If you don't know what yaoi is, wait until you're alone by yourself and then Google it.
And just say that some boys just love each other too much.
Well, according to women, they all love each other. Or at the very least, they lust each other, I'll tell you that much.
So, the mainline Touhou games, what number are they up to? 17. The 17 game just came out this summer, right?
Yeah, about a month ago. Actually.
And the game is called Wily Beast and Weakest Creature. I'm not sure if you can buy it digitally, but you might as well look.
I think it's on Steam.
Yeah, and then often, you could just pay, you pay for the game and then you go find an English patch yourself. That's how most people do it. Yeah. And then we already talked about the fact that rhythm games have a lot of Touhou music, and there's a lot of doujin manga and unsavory stuff available.
Unsavory? That's putting it mildly.
There's a lot of those Clamp artists around.
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot worse than that around.
But there's not even beyond just the the fighting game spin-offs and stuff that are the official works. But also, there are many, many, many fan games based on Touhou characters and setting in many different genres. Like, there's full RPGs.
There's Castlevania clones.
Yeah, we recently actually played through
we were streaming. Resolution was streaming the game Touhou Luna Nights, which is by the Circle Tomato. No, Ladybug.
Oh, I know that one.
Yes.
Tomato.
It was basically Castlevania, and it was awesome.
It's Castlevania with a time freeze mechanic.
Pretty much.
And then there's a couple of them actually you can buy at GameStop. There's Tokyo. We played Genso Bullet.
Yeah, I think you walked around Ramaya, was it? Wait,
that one was Genso Wanderer.
Oh, that was Genso Wanderer.
There's Genso Rondo, and then there's Wanderer.
Yeah, Wanderer is pretty neat. I think Rez would like that a lot. Basically, you play as either Sakuya or you play as Ramaya.
I don't know. I've never bought a Touhou game. There's no way to play that without pirating it.
Well, I thought the NIS ones were you could actually.
NIS America did publish a bunch of these at retail. So the Genso Wanderer, Bullet
was interesting.
Parade, and then they also did some Vita ones also.
That was Bullet Ballet.
Yes.
Yeah, and Double Focus.
And Double Focus is like it's interesting. It's like a Metroidvania. You can switch between two characters as you wish. And there's also Sharon the Wanderer style game where you play as the main Shrine Maiden girl. It's actually really good. And then I looked up on the Wikipedia, basically Zun made a collaboration where they brought a bunch of Dojin games to like release in Japan. They were eventually, a couple of them were translated and released here.
You mean like Seiho Project? Because that was like 2001 or something. He used to make before the Windows games. So like after the PC98 ones, for a while he was making games with I forget the name of this guy, but he was also a Danmaku like expert, and he was really making a lot of like bullet hell games on PC, and he collaborated with him to make Seiho Project, which was basically kind of like the antithesis to Touhou, while Touhou is kind of like, you know, heavy on magic and like religion and stuff.
So it's like
Seiho is literally just like futuristic and like robots and stuff.
That's what so it's like mechs and stuff.
That actually does sound very interesting.
That sounds really cool.
That's a common thing.
It was a very short-lived relationship though, because they only made like 3 games. And that was the earliest or the latest. I think it was like 2003 or something. And I've played some of them. They're not very good.
I mean,
they're not polished at all. I can see why Zune like left the team.
Good riddance.
Wow, throwing some shade there.
But what's even more interesting, there's very clearly games that are made off of the Touhou template. There is a rhythm game called Ongeki that's only released by Sega. There's effectively a rhythm game combined with a bullet hell game.
I haven't heard of them.
It's really interesting. Basically what you do in the game is you pick 3 characters that, of course, like you have to collect cards that are assigned to these girls, you put them in the slots, and then they're like your avatars as you play the stage. You pick a song, then you have to not only hit the notes of the song and like adjust the valves and stuff, you have to move the girls around the bullets.
Oh my gosh.
That sounds familiar.
That sounds insane.
That's madness.
So when's that coming to round 1?
Never.
I don't...
Ongeki is a big deal in Japan, though, because of not only the gacha card stuff, you know, the random...
Oh, it has gacha.
Everybody loves gacha elements.
You look at the...
Fate.
That's the fate of all arcades.
Yeah.
So it'd be card dispensers.
Fate stayed now.
And then to a big extent, not to be a memer here, but Undertale was definitely inspired by Touhou, to an extent.
Yeah, the creator said he was a big fan.
I was going to say, has he actually said that officially?
He's publicly said
yes, he has said that on his Twitter. The creator of Undertale.
Yeah.
Yes. And he's actually met with Zun.
Of course he has. Well, he lives in Japan, so...
Well,
as long as they don't make an Undertale crossover, I'm okay with
that. that might happen.
You say that, but there's actually a lot of Undertale like fan fights people have like made playable versions
like
of.
Chara versus our lovely remote.
There's so many AUs and so many things.
It's so fascinating. There's so many people making like fictional like fan fights that are all like different bullet patterns, and it's all really imaginative.
I'm actually glad that Zune is so indifferent to all that, because he would have taken some kind of rabbit hole that led somewhere that he didn't want the games to lead.
Yeah,
and his indifference is the only reason they're still the same.
Yep.
Right, what were you saying, Merlar?
It feels like a Dojin culture within a Dojin culture.
Yeah, definitely.
How you Inception. How you just kind of like how these fan fights are just kind of spawned just from this love and this desire to make this fan content, which in turn was just inspired by the creation of this man who was making his independent game.
Oh, I need to say, Zune is and always will be an alcoholic, so that was a very big...
Oh, is that the whole reason why the two mains...
It's the reason that there's a lot of alcohol. Well, in the main games, there's only a little bit, but in the manga works, he definitely likes to include a lot of drinking, which is good because he's actually
with the horns that think
Suika.
Yeah, the one who seems to be drinking carries a gourd around.
Yeah, exactly, and that's Zune loves beer. He goes to like Europe all the time, drinks like Trappist ale from like monks. And,
I mean, if I had that much money, then I would too.
But he's very into beer culture, which is pretty cool.
Where's the Touhou IPA?
Because like a lot of I think a lot of the English fan base kind of followed suit, and a lot of them are alcoholic too. They'll be like, oh, Zune's drinking this beer, so they'll go out and like find it.
They really like look at the photos. They get.
I know, because I was one of those. I remember like 2010, I would translate Zune's blog. And he'd be like, "Oh, I just Saint Bernardus ABT12 Trappist ale from Belgium." And I went out and I paid like $20 for like a 4-pack. That was amazing.
I would like to state that the Pixel Vision podcast and GamerRes do not at all support alcoholism or endorse it in any way.
Please weep responsibly.
Yes.
So, with that in mind, what do you think is the future of Touhou Project?
I think a lot of the same. I mean,
as long as Zun's around, there's going to be more games. As long as people are...
He's never stated that he's bored or anything. Like, he's not... It's not a dead medium anymore. Like, it's still thriving, even though...
It's like his child, in a sense.
I kind of disagree.
Even though the actual community... Like, the Danmaku format as a whole is definitely going away, but...
Really?
There's... Aside from Cave making a few, there's not really much of a community than it used to be, where everyone was just playing those. Now they're playing mobile games or like gacha games.
Mobile.
All those.
Now Fate Grand Order is the beast.
I said that earlier. I think actually I disagree a bit with things staying the same, though. I think they're more so going to continue to expand because of technology changing. And what I think is actually the most interesting about Touhou, aside from the story lore and original gameplay and where it came from, is the fact there's not a lot of actual franchises, which I think you could state Touhou is a franchise, even if it's not corporate, that has this level of freedom, especially in terms of blessing by its creator. I mean, there's always going to be a ton of fan games for Mario and stuff, or Pokemon, but how often does Nintendo allow that? Never.
No one's ever like taken down a Touhou game. And Zun pretty much has the power to say so that's going to happen. He seems very chill with that, and I think because of that, well, the games are going to probably vary in quality too, since a lot of them are all just labors of love. Really, no one's getting rich off this.
I can say right away, like Zun as a person, he has always been an avid gamer, and it shows because a lot of his early music, believe it or not, back when the PC98 games were, just this one guy. Like, without any kind of corporatization or, like, making any money. He actually sampled pretty much at least half of his music was used from other games. So he'd rip off, well, I wouldn't say rip off, but he would sample, like, this arcade game or this, like, Genesis game. And then he'd, include part of it and references to it. Which he actually still does today. Which is pretty interesting that he kind of, like, throws little, like, Easter eggs for people that hunt it down.
Wasn't there some song you were saying that is like a famous Touhou song that is like a direct rip-off of some other famous song?
Well, there's quite a bit. The most infamous one is probably Remilia's theme, which is Beethoven. Literally, the first like 20 notes or something is Beethoven's one of his piano songs, the Pathétique, I think it's called. And it's like da 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 da, and it's like the same melody. And he just kind of threw it in there.
And how did he change? What did he change it to?
Oh, after like 20 notes, it doesn't do that. It sounds more like a video game song than a classical, piano sonata.
Although arguably, like the line between those two is kind of blurred in a lot of ways.
Yeah, there's a lot of orchestral like influences.
in even
in a lot of his music.
Not just his music, but in like RPG music and other similar sorts of music.
Well, at least now, when every Dragon Quest game sounds like a symphony orchestra. I mean,
although,
that's kind of a
what's interesting
format
though,
now.
Sorry not to interrupt you, but what's interesting though is that it's kind of a side topic, but Dragon Quest and Final Fantasy, more or less, like Dragon Quest is classical style kind of fantasy, rousing adventure music, and Final Fantasy is just prog rock music.
Basically,
yes.
A lot of the
yeah,
time,
literally.
yeah.
Like, Nobuo Uematsu was just a guy who worked in, like, a record store when he was 30, and, like, someone at Square was like, you want to make a music for a game? He was like, okay.
I think he just progressed.
I mean, I wouldn't just merely say it was just prog rock entirely, but like a lot
you
of
listen to the Final Fantasy VII soundtrack. There's a lot of.
I've listened to every single Final
rock.
Fantasy soundtrack practically in existence. But what I'm saying is, I wouldn't say that everything is prog rock. I would say the battle themes and everything definitely fit that, and that would make more sense. Even when we went to the convention today, you got to hear Decisive Battle and everything on the SNES. That's a boss theme. Of course, it has like a rockin' tune to it. You're supposed to be hyped up to fight like the big baddie, basically. But I mean, what about the interlude?
Speaking of prog
is that prog rock? Because I don't know what your definition of prog rock is. But I seriously think the interlude has anything to do with rock.
Yeah.
So I think you might want to back up on that statement there.
One of the songs that Zune sampled was actually a prog rock song from the 70s.
Really?
It's called Rydeen, which is a
Yes.
Yellow Magic Orchestra song.
Sure.
YMO.
Yeah. It's actually probably the most well-known in Japan, because YMO, for people who don't know, was basically the equivalent of how the Beatles affected the world in America and the UK. That's around the same time YMO basically strived to do the same thing, and it succeeded because YMO is probably the most well-known, like electronic, like prog rock group from the 70s, because everyone knew about it back then.
Right.
Essentially, it was a couple of Japanese studio musicians who were between albums, and they were like, you know what, let's make an album ourselves. And then they just casually revolutionized the entire
it's
pop
similar
landscape.
to how Touhou happened, actually, because there was 3 guys that wanted to make a parody, and they made a parody band, YMO, because Electric Magic Orchestra was, the original. The EMO has been around for a long time.
ELO being the band that people compare to the Beatles a lot.
Yeah. So then they were like, oh, let's make a parody. So all these, people came together, and they're like, they make this great music, and then...
Firecrackers, a phenomenal song.
Yeah, definitely. And then it blew up the same way Touhou did. It's like, oh, this started as a parody, and then it
people took it seriously.
Yeah, that's how a lot of projects start, honestly.
That's how Japan has been for a while. Parodies are very independent things, just become big.
That's kind of how YouTube culture is. Like, everything starts doing parodies because it's already a recognized property that people are familiar with and they like it. And then once they like the creator, and the creator goes on and starts doing original works. It's kind of a healthy evolution.
So we're having with Siva Gunner to an extent.
Speaking of, that kind of comes back to what I was talking about in terms of the fan games and stuff. I think are actually, even if the community itself may not be as tightly knit together as I think you were describing before. I would say,
like the Japanese or the English?
I would say everything, but I would say even more so the English actually now, because now there is greater reach and technology is, for better or for worse, far more involved in our lives than it was in the early 2000s.
Yeah, I think with like YouTube
90s.
and stuff like that, it just blew up.
Yeah, not even just in terms of the rate of information, but also in terms of the accessibility of game development. Game development now is practically a snitch. You can make something for out of nothing now with middleware like Unity, Unreal, and stuff is all free now. Whereas not too long ago, it cost you several grand just for a license.
And you need to actually learn a lot of programming.
Not necessarily. It really depends on how much you want to do. I'm also just insane and want to do it that way.
You can be Chris Sawyer and make Roller Coaster Tycoon entirely out of assembly.
Like, let me put it to you this way.
Line Rider.
If you just want to make
from early high school
very simple games, you could even just make visual novels. And I'm going to plug my friend's game here too real quick, who's the head developer for a visual novel studio that just came out that's starting to pick up steam called Chaos Cute Soft. Ugh, I screwed KFC, that up. Chaos Chaos. Damn.
Take 2.
Chaos Cute Soft.
Well, that sounds better than KFC.
Yeah. Oh god. Fine,
Kentucky Fried Chaos.
Kentucky Fried... okay, that's a game we're making now. No, but
I love a Colonel Sanders game.
I'm sorry, David. I'm ruining your plug. It's Chaos Cute Soft, and they just like to make visual novels, and he's the lead programmer for it, and they actually, while they're working on their main game, he's a big Touhou fan. They released Cyrno's... that's how you say her name, right? Churno. So there's the H isn't physically there. Okay. Churno's Perfect Summer Vacation on Android, and it's people like it. It's not like my cup of tea, but if you like visual knowledge, you like Touhou, check it out. I believe it's like free. If not, it's $1. Okay, it's $1 or something.
A Dolo project.
I'm tired. Quiet.
We're all tired in this room.
Yeah, we're filming this in a hotel. It's late at night. I want to go to bed.
Me too.
So maybe that would be a good point for closing thoughts now that I stopped shilling for my friend's game.
Essentially, I think that Touhou is a wonderful thing. It's not for everybody, but for those who it is for, I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, I think anybody can get value out of it too. If you don't like the games, like the music is phenomenal.
Yeah, you can get into whatever you want. You can get into the games, you can get into the manga, you can get into the fan music, you can get into the anything you want. Basically.
Stay out of the image boards.
What do you think?
I want to mark myself.
Good.
What are your closing thoughts, Melora?
You can have those fetishes.
I think Touhou it's honestly pretty remarkable how fan content can bring people together and give rise to more fan content and just become this cascading avalanche of all sorts of creation. And it helps to really bring people together and existing kind of like its own microcosm within just the larger landscape of fan content while also acting as a macrocosm for its own universe and its own offshoots and creations.
Yes, very well put.
And I think it's a wonderful thing.
Yeah. Shadow?
For me, as for me, it's just like the music. Was the whole reason I got into it in the first place.
I was always going to be more of it.
Great.
Yeah, I love hearing all the remixes. I like hearing all the new remixes when they come out.
Yes,
and it's just immensely satisfying and always.
Speaking of which, Autumn Ray Taisai is next week.
Oh, what is that?
Which is Ray Taisai is basically a Comic Cat clone event where only Touhou works are being sold. So everyone that goes to Ray Taisai goes there specifically just for Touhou.
I've heard that before.
Does that mean there going to be more remixes?
Yeah. Definitely.
There's going to be new remixes of the new game that came out last month.
Whoa!
I heard there's a torrent floating around with over 100 terabytes of Touhou music.
Oh, I have 2 now.
100
terabytes. 2 terabytes.
2 terabytes?
Yeah, I have the lossless collection, and then...
of course you do.
Of course you do!
That took about 3 months of bandwidth.
Wow.
So,
but that was back then. I gotta update it.
So, what are your closing thoughts on how Touhou has affected your kind of weebery?
I wouldn't consider it weeb, but
what would you consider it then?
I would consider it niche.
Niche.
Above anything, even how big it's become, it's still people that actually like the content, which is mainly the games, not the the fan stuff. People that are still true to the games and the game's lore are always going to want to play them. Even if you've already played the game before and you've read all the dialogue, going back and being better at the game is the main drive to all the hardcore players.
So for you, it's the challenge that really brings you back to the
I would say the challenge of the game itself is what brings me to keep playing them, and then for those who also play them, discussing what to do in
the
situations. Yeah, that's always going to be there because all the new games, there's all this.
Just with the sheer madness.
This madness.
The madness at the heart of difficulties, good lord.
I mean, that's bullet hell in general, just play any cave shooter.
There's room for games that are that hard, I think. Because often we're having a conversation now, should games be accessible to everybody?
I don't think so.
I think there are certain types of games that are definitely for people who have lots of they want to get invested in this one game and master it. There are certain types of games that could be tuned to be more mass audience, but I don't think every game should be for everybody.
Because every game isn't for everyone, because every genre is different from every genre.
I don't expect people to read War and Peace.
Yeah, just
if
like I don't expect everybody to beat Dark Souls either.
If you're into anime and you watch Lucky Star and you like it, I'm not expecting you to be like, okay, you're not a real anime fan if you haven't watched Legend of the Galactic Heroes.
Yeah. You know what's funny?
Two different things.
About Dark Souls, near the ending of its time, before they came out with the remaster and all that, during near the time, I never actually beat any of the Dark Souls. The first Dark Souls game I beat was Dark Souls 3. I didn't beat Dark Souls 1 until much later with a friend.
There's definitely there's like a fractal difference between like actual like the hardcore audience where a lot of the like speedrunning takes place and a lot of the like people who play games over and over and things that take a long time to beat. And then there's the other side, which is, you know, you got your mobile games and the, you know, click here to win games. You know, there's always going to be always going to be games on both sides.
I think I always just kind of fall in the middle of that spectrum. I mean, sometimes I become a completionist if I really love the series, but most of the time I just kind of beat the game and move on because my head is hell and I love diversity, so I jump between platformers to shooters to RPGs to everything.
I'm pretty much
so
the same
I
way.
can't dedicate myself to the same game for honestly more than a month.
I'm pretty much the same thing. I play a game basically when a game first comes out, and if I get it on release, I usually play it for like a month straight, and then I just don't touch it for a long time. Then I just don't.
You go back when you feel like it.
Yeah, I go back when I just feel the urge to play it.
That happened with me with Overwatch, but that's the kind.
And that's probably why games really shouldn't have to be forced to have like a special difficulty or anything anyway, because...
In journalist mode?
Yeah, game journalist mode.
Mean.
Cuphead,
That's
I can't get past the
Sekiro.
tutorial.
Yeah?
Oh,
They said Sekiro should have an easy mode for journalists.
I disagree.
And then Miyazaki was
No.
like, no.
Sekiro was made to be tough.
You know what would be
Death Stranding
hilarious?
is going to have a very easy mode, apparently.
You know what would be
I don't want anything
hilarious?
to do with that game.
If the next game they make, that if it's going to follow the brutal difficulty, because that is what we like to make, and we are the artists that have a right to do that, they should send game journalists the hardest difficulty mode on purpose.
Yeah.
Because you know, it doesn't matter how bad they pan it, the game's just going to get even more press before it comes out.
Or what'll happen is the game will be out, they play it, they can't beat it, then a week later the lore videos come out, and then it's like, this game has a very deep story. And,
Well, they give it a really bad rating, and then
see,
like
here's
a
the
month
thing.
later they realize it's actually a game.
Here's the
and
thing
they
about
change it.
From Software. They like making games harder. When they come out with the games, they say, Carter, how can we make a game, the next game even harder? Let's do it. And they just keep doing it harder, more infuriating. God damn it.
It just has to still be somehow possible.
yes.
There needs to be a 0.1% chance, you know, that you will retain your sanity and actually see the actual credits at some point.
Yeah. You right?
Yeah.
Yeah, stop dying. That's not allowed in the simulation, the res world.
I think we've said what we wanted to say about Touhou Project, and I think it's a wonderful thing, and I hope you all learned something tonight.
What is this, PBS?
This is PBS.
How many people are going to get
Signing
that?
off the air, God bless America, don't die.
No. Alright, so in all seriousness, though, yeah, I think we covered that pretty well. But something I'd actually like to ask is not only what everyone who listened to this, if they got to the end of this, thought of it, but now that I think about it, we talked about Touhou as this crazy phenomenon that's this franchise that isn't tied to corporate like control or anything. Are there any other franchises out there like that within the video game world that anyone else would like to share? Tell us in the comments, send me a message, tweet at me, at GamerRez, at Deft Beck. I believe Melora and Shadow and Anon would like to remain without being contacted, personally speaking, so let the two of us know. We're the two whores that want to talk to people.
Please talk to me.
Talk to the lizard
They're
whore.
Don't be a
very,
second
they're very lonely.
So, in conclusion,
In conclusion, Touhou's awesome. It's interesting. It's not for everybody, but for who it is, they love it. Long may it live. Have a good day.